Hello and welcome back.
Great moments are born from great opportunity.
You heard Herb Brooks. If you're here watching this video, it means you're likely in your fantasy championship or semifinal matchup and you need something to get you across the finish line. So today, as we always do, we'll look at everything you need to win your matchup this week and for some, bring home that fantasy championship. So let's start by looking at the schedule. There's no two-game teams this week. Everybody either plays 3 times or 4 times. You can see the split right here. It's a pretty much exact split. 16 teams play 4 times, 16 teams play 3 times. So you're probably going to have some decisions to make on the heavier nights. So let's look at how the schedule breaks down. Now, nobody has a perfect schedule. Nobody has the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and nobody has a Wednesday, Friday. A couple of teams have a Monday, Wednesday, but some of those teams don't play 4 games. So with your waiver ads this week, look at your lineup tonight or early Monday morning and see where you need some help. Where are you light in terms of guys that you're starting? Where are you heavy? Can you transition some guys to maximize the amount of games played you're getting this week? Because there is no one team that you can just pick up guys from and hope that that puts you over the finish line. Now, 2 teams play 4 times with 2 off nights, and that is Florida and the Islanders. You can see Florida here. They're on the road the entire week, so that does play a factor here. They have a road back-to-back in Toronto and Montreal. There are some winnable matchups here, and they need to win games because they're in a playoff hunt right now, and they've been dropping some games to teams that they should beat. They had a lead on the Rangers the other night. They dropped that game as well. They need to make up some ground, so they have to play well. I would assume Bobrovsky gets at least 3 of these starts, but it is a difficult matchup with the road back-to-back and all 4 games on the road. So keep that in mind, but there are some potential games that are going to have a lot of offense. This game against Columbus, this game against Montreal, even this game against Ottawa could have a lot of offense. So take that into consideration with your waiver ads. The Islanders have a much harder schedule. They do play Monday, Wednesday, but they also have a road back-to-back in Tampa and Carolina on the weekend. That is difficult for the Islanders, and they also are in a playoff hunt. They currently have the wild card spot over Florida. So this is going to be a big week for both of these teams, and both of these teams need their players to show up this week. So that's going to add some motivation, and those are going to be some guys you're going to want to target. In addition to that, 4 teams play 3 times this week with 2 off nights, and you're looking at them at the bottom: Colorado, Buffalo, Minnesota, and Arizona. Of these, Colorado has this nice game in Anaheim on Monday. This should be a low-scoring game against Minnesota. This is also probably a low-scoring game, but obviously Colorado has the offensive firepower to push through that. With Buffalo, this should be a high-scoring game, and this should be a high-scoring game against Philly, but Philly's been playing much better of late, 4-0-1 in their last 5, and they've been giving up a lot fewer goals against, so that could play a factor, and it's on that busy Saturday, so you might not get some of those Sabres in there if they're not very productive. They do also play the Rangers. That should be a difficult game for them on Friday, but it is one of 4 games on Friday, so keep that in mind as well. For Minnesota, they have a tough schedule all week. A couple of the best in the West. They have Seattle on Monday at home, this game against Colorado, and then the game against Vegas. So that's a couple of really good teams, some good defensive teams, and they're lacking Kaprizov right now still. But Matt Boldy has been making up for that with 6 goals over the past couple of games. So he's been picking up the slack where Kaprizov would have been. And then you also have Arizona. They're home against Edmonton on Monday. Then they have a Friday game against Dallas. That should be low scoring at home. So that does help the Coyotes ads because they're much better at home than they are on the road. And then they have a winnable game on Saturday against San Jose. So that should be a game where you might be able to get a guy like Clayton Keller in the lineup and maybe some of these other waiver pickups that you've added. But this is the way it breaks down. These are the teams with the most off nights. You can see these 2 teams at the top play 4. These 4 teams at the bottom play 3 times. Now, the other way you're going to want to play this is because of the fact that you have different needs for each team. You're going to want to take a look at the schedule. This is the back half of the schedule. So these are the teams that play 3 games from Thursday to Sunday. Now, of these, this group of teams, I believe there's 10 teams here. There's only 2 teams that play Thursday, Friday, Sunday, which means that you're not going to have to make a roster decision on Saturday which will be a heavier day anyway, and it'll be tough for you to get guys into your lineup on Saturday. So those two teams, the Rangers and the Red Wings, there are players that you can get from both teams. For the Rangers, I'm looking at the kid line and Keandre Miller. For Detroit, there's a number of guys that are getting some opportunities. They just haven't been the same team that they were earlier in the season, and this is a difficult game against Carolina. This should be a difficult game against Winnipeg, and this is a difficult game against Toronto on the road, no less. So of the two, I would prefer to have Rangers players Thursday, Friday, Sunday. This Buffalo game is very winnable. This Caps game is winnable as well. This will be a difficult game on Thursday against the Devils with potential playoff seeding at stake. Maybe not, because the Devils seem to have locked up second place in the division, but no less. Two top 5 teams in the NHL going at it. That should be fun. Then you also have Boston. They have a great schedule, albeit they do play the heavy nights, but if you own any Boston players, they're going to get in your lineup. And then they do have the back-to-back on the road in Pittsburgh and then in St. Louis. So there could be some goals there depending on who they start in this game, but you're going to want to get your Boston guys in. They're going to probably, you would expect them to light up Columbus on Thursday, but I've seen crazier things happen. They lost to Chicago a couple weeks ago. For Columbus, they have a very difficult front half of the schedule, but if you're just picking up guys for the weekend, Florida and Ottawa are decent opponents, and they're at home. So that could play into it, and there are a bunch of guys on Columbus that you can own. So maybe think about that when we're going over the players to add this week, because they do play this Saturday, Sunday back-to-back. Anaheim, they have a tough schedule. Colorado, Seattle, Edmonton, Calgary. 3 of those are road games, so I wouldn't be advising picking up Ducks. The Devils, they have a nice matchup here on Saturday against the Blackhawks. That should produce some goals and some offense. Then they have a road back-to-back in Winnipeg. That will be a little bit difficult. So will this game on Thursday. This game, I don't know what to expect. The Islanders need it bad. The Devils don't need it as much, but this is a rivalry, and anytime these two teams meet, there should be some fireworks. For Ottawa, they have a couple of games here that they could win and make up some offensive ground here. Philly and Columbus, 2 of the 4 games that they play. Florida, not particularly great defensively. The only game that you're going to want to sit your, maybe not your top 6 guys in Ottawa, like your Giroux and Stützles and all those guys, but this Toronto game should be a little bit more lower scoring. So do keep that in mind. For Philly, Buffalo and Pittsburgh on the back-to-back at the end of the week, but they also have this Ottawa game that's a little bit easier. And they have this game against Montreal. That should be higher scoring. So all in all, Flyers are starting to produce some guys that you can potentially own. There's a number of them. We'll go over that in just a little bit. And these guys are potentially going to score a decent amount this week with not many great defensive teams that they play this week and some goaltenders that are question marks for some of these teams as well. Jari, he was out for a period of the last week or so. I've already dropped him, so he's been declining over the past month anyway. Then you have the 3 goaltenders, potentially 4 with Devin Levi coming up. So this could be a nice offensive week for the Flyers. For Pittsburgh, Boston on Saturday, that's tough. I wouldn't start my Pens on Saturday unless you have Crosby or something like that. They do have Philly on the back-to-back. This Detroit game, that is winnable, and they need to win these games because they are also in a playoff hunt. And then you have LA down here. They have a difficult schedule until they get to this game, the road back-to-back in Seattle and in Vancouver. I would imagine that they're going to start both of their goalies twice this week. We'll get to that in the goalie section of this video. But this is a little bit of a sneak preview of what you can expect to add for the second half of the week. If you're looking at your ads, a lot of these Sunday games, the guys are going to be picked up before Sunday. So get out in front of it. Try to target these guys on Thursday, because then you can at least get, especially from these two teams, you'll get at least 2 games out of them on Friday and Sunday. And then here you might be able to get a Thursday and a Sunday out of some of these teams. But this is the way it breaks down. And now let's get into the defensive streaming options. What the segment used to be called the best of the rest. It's just going to be called that for this, despite the fact that I'm not really favoring any schedule. But we'll start with some of the defensemen that are getting it done recently. And let's start with Adam Boqvist. 7% owned, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, 2 power play points, and 13 shots in his last 5 games. They have a 4-game week this week. And Columbus, believe it or not, over the last 10 games has the second best power play percentage in the league at 33.3%, tied with Edmonton. And Adam Boqvist is their power play quarterback. So that is a guy, in a deep league you're going to want exposure to. You can see here he does get some blocks, he gets some power play points, assists, and the goals are starting to come up a little bit. He did have 2 goals in the last 5 games, so that's typically something that he's known for is goals, averaging around 17 goals per season pace in 2 of the last 3 seasons that he's played. So the goals should be coming. They could continue to come. And there are opportunities in the top power play unit for Columbus with guys like Laine going down, and we'll cover some of those guys with the forwards. But if you want the defenseman that's quarterbacking that power play, Adam Boquist at 7%, he's under-owned in my opinion. He should be owned as a power play quarterback for one of the best power plays over the last 10 games. Now up next, we have another power play quarterback who is under-owned, and that is Jake Sanderson. So Chychrun goes down. He's now out for the next couple of weeks. But even before that, Jake Sanderson was getting the PP1 time, which does hurt Thomas Chabot a little bit. But it does help Jake Sanderson, and he's only 29% owned. 4 assists, all of them on the power play. 12 shots, 9 hits, 22 blocks in his last 8 games. And you can see here, 95th percentile in blocks. So you're getting a blocks defenseman with some power play exposure and some assists. Doesn't get a lot of shots or hits or goals. But if you need those power play assists, if those are weighted a little bit heavier and you need blocks as well, this is definitely a guy to go to. And with that Ottawa power play, you're getting exposure to some of the best players in the league, including Claude Giroux. So this would be another guy that I'd be looking at maybe in a 10 or 12 team league to try to find that power play exposure if you need those power play points. But the best defenseman you can add is Mike Matheson, 35% owned. I still don't understand why. 9 points, 3 goals, 6 assists, 3 power play points, 23 shots, and 14 blocks, 2 blocks per game over his last 7 games. He's a 79 on the hub. I covered him last week. He's very complete. The lowest he's at is 58th percentile in hits, but that's still giving you over a hit per game. He's 89th percentile in blocks, 87th in shots, getting 2.5 shots per game. The shots have been increasing above that level. He's over 3 shots per game in his last 7 games. So he's been really productive. I personally just dropped Aaron Ekblad, who I drafted him third, my 3rd draft pick in my main league. I waited on him all year to finally find his game. He did not do that. So I ended up having to drop him for Matheson because Matheson is better over the last 7 days, over the last 14 days, over the last month. He's way better than Ekblad. And he's one of the best defensemen in the league right now. So one of those guys, good player on a bad team, power play 1, quarterback. This is a guy that you need to have in your lineup if you're trying to make a push for the championship. They do have a 4-game week next week, as we just saw. So this is definitely a must-own. If you have the ability to add a defenseman, this would be the guy I would be targeting. If you can't get Mike Matheson, you probably won't be able to get Adam Larsson either, but if you need hits and blocks specifically, he's an elite level hits and blocks defenseman, 98th percentile in blocks, 93rd in hits, and the offensive production it comes in waves with Adam Larsson. 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points in his last 5 games, 10 hits, and 16 blocks in that span. That's playing with Vince Dunn, who's one of the best defensemen, fantasy defensemen in the league over the last couple of weeks. Last couple of months, really. He's been incredible since I've picked him up. 58% owned, so he might not be there for you. But in a shallow league, if you need hits and blocks, he's definitely been getting it done. 3-game week this week is the only downside to his file. Other than that, he's a very steady hits and blocks defenseman who's getting offensive production every now and then. And this is a time in the schedule where Seattle's going to play a lot of division games, a lot of good teams. So they need their top defenseman to step up, and that would be Adam Larsson, one of those top defensemen that's going to need to step up. He just doesn't get any power play time, so that's the only downside other than the 3-game week. Now, this next player we're going to talk about, it hasn't happened yet, but Filip Hronek just went over to Vancouver at the deadline. He's played 2 games with them, has 1 assist, 4 hits in 2 games with Vancouver. But the interesting thing here is he got put on power play 1 in the previous game. He was on power play 2, but he's a power play guy. You can see 88th percentile in power play production, most of that with Detroit. But if they can get their power play units going, if they can figure out the chemistry, and if he's going to get you exposure to guys like Pettersson, guys like Kuzmenko, etc., this is a must-own for this upcoming week, although they only have 3 games, and I believe they're Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So that could play a role here as well. But if you need it. He's a very complete defenseman. 58th percentile in goals is the lowest that he has here. Everything else is really good. 1.6 hits per game, almost a block per game. The power play exposure is pretty good. The shot volume is not bad at 2 shots per game. And the assists, 86th percentile. So he's a relatively complete defenseman, the second most complete defenseman that we're talking about right here. So he would be one of those guys that not a lot of people remember because of the fact that he's been out for so long, but he's 46% owned. So if he's there, and if you want to take a chance on some high upside and some exposure to the top power play unit in Vancouver, Filip Hronek would be the best player to do that with. But there's another guy, if you can't get any of these guys, Adam Boquist is the lowest percentage guy that we'll talk about, but Mikey Anderson has been coming along really nicely. He's been a hits and blocks defenseman, but he's now adding the offensive exposure as well. 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points in his last 4 games, a power play point, 9 hits, 9 blocks. So 94th percentile in blocks, that's what you're owning him for. 1.76 blocks per game, over 2 hits per game as well. The shot volume's low. Everything else seems to be low for the season, but over the past couple of weeks here, he's been a lot more offensively productive. He gets top pair minutes and he plays about 20 minutes per game. And Los Angeles is one of those teams that's going to continue to climb as they've found their goaltending. They've fixed their goaltending issues. That was the one thing that was holding them back. I see LA as a potential top 3 team in the West at this point with the goaltending that they have from Copley, from Korpisalo, the defense they have, the offensive firepower they have. This is a team you're going to want to add some exposure to. They have a 4-game week this week. I had somebody asking me about Andrew Peeke versus Mikey Anderson for blocks coverage. And for Peeke, he's a 99th percentile in blocks, I believe, but he doesn't get anything else. At least Mikey Anderson is getting you some other stuff, some goals, assists, points, even a little bit of power play time for Mikey Anderson. They do use a lot of different guys on the power play. At times it was Dursey, sometimes it's Doughty. At points it was Jordan Spence. Mikey Anderson apparently getting some time, so they kind of spread it out a little bit. So you can't really count on power play time for Anderson, but you're getting the hits and blocks and a little bit of other exposure as well, and he's only 13% owned, so he could be a decent deep league option. But that's going to do it for the D. Let's turn to the forwards this week. We'll start it off with a little bit of a deep league play, but a guy who's red hot, and that is Pavel Dorofeyev, however you want to say it. 2% owned, single position left wing, 5 goals, 7 points in his last 7 games, 3 of those on the power play, 95th percentile in goal production. It is a small sample size. He's only played 7 or so games, I believe, all season. He might have played 2 earlier in the season, but at least in the last 7 games, it is still a really small sample size, but it is nice to see 5 goals in 7 games, especially if you're in a deep league and you need that 2% ownership level, because he's been getting it done. He's on second line right now with Carlson and Amadio. He's on PP2. The only problem is they have a 3-game week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, so he may or may not get into your lineup this week. But he is a deep league option, and if you need a winger for those heavier nights this week, if you've lost somebody due to injury, Dorofeyev has been producing, and he's getting a top 6 role in Vegas, and they are a team that is on the rise. They're trying to make a push to be atop the Pacific Division, so this is a nice line assignment for Dorofeyev, and he's a goal scorer for sure. He's a 3rd-round pick. I listed him last week, gave out his stats in the AHL. He's been relatively productive there. Now he's getting a call-up, and he's got 7 points in 7 games, and goal heavy as well. So if you're in a points league that needs goal production, he's doing that for you as well. Up next, we have Evan Rodriguez, 22% owned. There's 2 other guys. Obviously, anytime you talk about Colorado, you're talking about Rodriguez and Comfer. I mentioned Mulligan last week. He had a nice week. He's 23% owned. Comfer is at 52% owned, despite being on PP1. You may not be able to get him. Rodriguez at 22% owned. I believe he's back today. He had concussion symptoms, but he's back now. And that 3-position eligibility is key because they do have 3 games this week. Some of those are going to be on the heavier nights, and he's a 3-position eligible player, so he will be able to get into your roster more likely than not. In terms of, Dorofeyev at a single left wing, he might not get in, whereas Rodriguez, you have 3 different positions you can use him in, so that does bump his exposure as well. On top of that, he's second line right now, which is going to perk your ears up anytime you're talking top 6 in Colorado. And then he doesn't have a ton of points over his last number of games, but he did miss some time with injury, so He has gone off at different points in the season, and it's between Rodriguez, Comfer, and Mulligan. If you see any of those guys in the top 6 on the top power play unit, those are the guys to pick up, but you can't really get Comfer in a deep league or even a 12-team league at this point. So Rodriguez would be the add from Colorado this week, and he gets the shot volume, 91st percentile in shots, 2.9 shots per game. That's going to be a little bit better than Comfer. Comfer, this is a little bit more leveled out, more plateaued here, and then the blocks are up a little bit. So that makes him a little bit more complete on the hub. But in terms of shot volume, if you need shots, if that's part of your point weighting, you get points for shots, then Evan Rodriguez is definitely a better option. Up next, we have a couple of guys from Philadelphia, and this is where you can find some huge value. Joel Farabee, only 2% owned, center left wing, 7 points in his last 6 games, 4 goals, 3 assists, a power play point, 16 shots. If you look at his hub, it's not that impressive. He hasn't done it this year the way that he did last year, but he's top line right now, power play 2. They have a 4-game week, and nobody owns him. For whatever reason, he's relatively productive. 7 points in 6 games is really productive in my opinion, and he's only 2% owned. So that's a deep league play that could come in handy, even if you're in a 10 or 12 team league. As I mentioned, Philly has a couple of matchups that you could exploit this week for some offense, and he's on the top line right now, so that is something that's going to perk your ears up. And another guy that is almost identical, 7 points in his last 6 games, Tyson Forrester. Now, he got loaned to Lehigh Valley on Saturday, so his availability may be questionable, but he's 0% owned. So in any league format, if you have Tyson Forrester there and you need some offensive production, he was getting an elevated role in the lineup. He's got an absolute laser of a shot. He was really productive in junior. Comes up this year, and again, 7 points in his last 6 games, 3 goals, 4 assists. So that's an even deeper league option. But then you also have another guy that we're going to talk about from Philadelphia, and that is Owen Tippett. He's only 20% owned, which does not make sense to me. 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points in his last 6 games, 2 power play points, 19 shots. The shot volume is really nice from Tippett. 92nd percentile there, 88th percentile in goals. He gets a bunch of hits and blocks as well, which makes him really complete at a 77 overall. So 1.6 hits per game, almost a block per game. Gets some power play time as well. He was playing anywhere between 20 and 24 minutes per game because he seems to have earned the trust of John Tortorella. So this would be the best option, in my opinion, from Philly because of the fact that he's been doing it for a longer sample size, and he gets you that shot and goal volume, which is typically more valuable in fantasy, especially in points leagues that weight shots and goals a little bit heavier. I still don't understand the 20% ownership, but if he's there, he's a really nice own, especially in a 4-game week like they have this week. Now, up next, we have an even more complete player, a guy I've talked about a number of times on the channel as well, and that is Boone Jenner. 38% owned, single position center, 5 goals, 6 points in his last 7 games, 23 shots and 2 power play points in that span. He's an 81 on the hub because he does a little bit of everything. So he's getting you 82nd percentile in hits, almost 2 hits per game, over a block per game, some power play time. He's now on PP1, and they need him to score because they lost Patrick Laine, so they need some guys to step up, win some draws, take control of the puck, and get some power play production. And their power play, as I mentioned before, was second in the league over the last 10 games. 97th percentile in shots, 3.34 shots per game. He's right around that over his past 7 games, so you're still getting that shot volume. 93rd percentile in goals. As you can see, 5 goals in his last 7 games, so it's really goal-heavy, 6 points in the last 7. So you're getting the goals, you're getting the shots, all the things that you wanted with Tippett, but you're getting a little bit more hits, a little bit more blocks. And again, they have a 4-game week this week. It may not be as favorable as Philadelphia's schedule, but there's still 4 games, and they're still going to need him to play all the big situations, the power play, the penalty kill, etc. So he's the most complete player that you can probably own in a 12-team league or a 10-team league, anything like that. But I've been talking about Jenner all season long for good reason. If you can't get Jenner, Kent Johnson, 6% owned, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points in his last 7 games, 3 of those on the power play. So Johnson is currently listed as power play 2, but he's one of those top 6 guys, really skilled. You could see it with that Michigan goal that he scored the other night. You also have Marchenko, who's on PP1. You have Bemstrom, Roslovic. Those guys have been getting a couple of points in the last 7 games. So there's a number of deeper league options you can go to in Columbus. But the number one ad would be Boone Jenner for the reasons that I just listed. And then Kent Johnson is the second hottest player of that bunch. But then you also have Marchenko, Bemstrom, and Roslovic that you could go to if you need some exposure to Columbus. Up next, we have a guy, again, I don't understand the 40% ownership. Tom Wilson, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points in his last 7, 19 shots, 17 hits, and 2 power play points. He's doing everything. If you're in a hits league, he's a must own. 97th percentile in hits, 3.13 hits per game, 89th percentile in goals, 0.33 goals per game, so a goal every 3rd game, essentially. He's getting some power play exposure, obviously. That's going to change with guys moving in and out of the lineup. With John Carlson back, that could potentially make their power play a little bit more potent, as we saw with Carlson's first game back against Chicago. This is another one of those guys that is a hits and goal scoring machine, and at 40% owned, I don't understand that. There is another guy that we'll talk about from Washington in just a second, but before we do that, there is another guy who's been owned up at various points during the season, but he's been getting no respect lately, and that is Nick Suzuki. 2 goals, 10 assists, 12 points in his last 7 games, 3 of those on the power play. Not incredibly complete because he doesn't hit or shot block a ton, but 86th percentile in power play points. He's on their top unit. He's top line center. He's going to be in all of those situations, and Montreal is scoring. So they have a 4-game week this week, and over their last 10, they've been averaging 3.8 goals for per game. So they're losing games, but they're scoring a ton of goals in those games. So you might want to add Nick Suzuki if you need a center. It just depends on whether or not you need the hits and everything else that Boone Jenner would give you, or if you want the assists and the power play production that Suzuki will give you, because the assists, 10 assists in his last 7 games is incredible. The 12 points in his last 7 games is also really nice. And again, he's only 56% owned, so he might be there for you in a 10-team league, a 12-team league, something like that. But now we get back to the Washington Capitals and a guy that I can't leave out of this video, Dylan Strome, center right wing, 2 goals, 8 assists, 10 points, 5 on the power play in his last 7 games, 19 shots in that span. On top of all of that, 5 goals, 12 assists, 17 points in his last 11 games for Dylan Strome. He's a center right wing, dual eligible. On the season, he doesn't get any hits at all, hardly any blocks, just if he happens to be in the way. Other than that, though, power play production's good, assists are really good, goal production's not bad, point production's pretty good at 3/4 of a point per game, and then you're getting a little bit of shot volume, close to 2 shots per game, but it was a little bit over 2 shots per game in this sample size of the last 7. So you're getting exposure in the top 6. They've been red hot. That line, it was Strome, Oshie, and Milano, I believe, for a period of time. I don't know if they've changed that up, but he is still top 6, and he is still producing. So if you need it, he's a dual eligible center. That might be a little bit more important in these weeks where you need to kind of maximize your waiver ads and pick up guys that are going to fit into your lineup a little bit better. Now, there are other options. Some of those will be featured in tomorrow's video. Some honorable mentions that I'll just quickly mention. Kasperi Kapanen, 5 points in his last 4. Daniel Sprong, 4 points in his last 3. Harvey Pinard, 3 goals in his last 3 games. And as I mentioned, again, every Monday I'll cover the top performers of the past week, so there will be some other names to add to this list as well. But let's turn now to the goalie pickups, and this is split into 2 different sections. So up front, we have goalie pickups. So if you need one goalie for the entire week, that's kind of what we're going for with this first slide, and then we'll get into the spot starts with the second slide. But we'll start it off with Carter Hart, 66% owned. For whatever reason, if he's there on your wire, go pick him up. He's red hot right now. Flyers are 4-0-1 in the last 5 games, averaging 2.8 goals against per game. And in that span, Carter Hart has 4 wins, 2.17 goals against, 928 save percentage, and a shutout. So this is exactly what I was talking about a couple of weeks ago. John Tortorella teams, they're not going to quit down the stretch. They're going to play spoiler. They're going to screw themselves out of Bedard. That's exactly what's happening. And now Carter Hart is a fantasy relevant goaltender again. And he's been hot and cold all season. When he gets hot, he does this. So if he's available and you need a goaltender for this week, they have a 4-game week, so you might as well go pick him up. It could be an offensive week with the matchups that they have, but nonetheless, he could chip away at a couple of wins there and help you with your fantasy season goaltending at the time when you need it the most. So this is not necessarily the safest play, but right now he is definitely on fire and you could go to that well. Up next, speaking of another goaltender who's red hot, Joel Hofer, 32% owned, last 4 starts, 3 wins, 174 goals against, 944 save percentage, and that shutout that he didn't get credit for. If you look at St. Louis's goaltending, it's abysmal unless you look at Hofer. So 944 save percentage, 174, that's what we just covered here. But if you look at the other 2 goaltenders, 750 save percentage, 596 goals against, you don't want anything to do with Thomas Greiss. Even Jordan Binnington, 478 goals against, 848 save percentage. That's minor league level. You don't want access to Binnington. So the only guy that you would want out of St. Louis would be Hofer. They do have a 4-game week this week, so I don't know how much he'll start. I would assume at least 2 games. And I don't know if they're trying to win or trying to lose. If they're trying to lose, they might as well start Binnington all 4 games, but otherwise, you're going to want Hofer in your lineup. He's been very productive since getting the call-up with the Binnington suspension. Up next, we have Philip Grubauer. I've pretty much been talking about him every week. He's stolen the net in Seattle. He's the number 1 goaltender right now. 2 wins in his last 3 starts. 2.43 goals against is a product of his team exposure. But then the 897 save percentage is also a product of his team exposure because they don't give up a ton of shots. I believe it's something in the vicinity of 25.75 shots against per game. So that works both ways. On the one hand, he's not getting a ton of shots against him. He's not getting a ton of quality chances against him. On the other hand, if he lets in 3 or 4 on a game where he's only getting 25 shots, that's going to kill his stats. So keep that in the back of your mind. If you're in a categories league, maybe he's a little bit less valuable. If you're in a points league that only cares about wins, goals against, total saves, or something like that, the wins are going to be there for Grubauer, and he is playing the starter role now with the team that's in a playoff spot currently. They're in a wild card spot, and they're competing for the Pacific Division top 3 spots, so they don't have to face one of the top 2 teams in the West. So this is a guy that I've been talking about for a couple of weeks for a reason. The save percentage hasn't come up to the levels that he was at in his previous life, where he was above a 920 every single season, but he is still fantasy relevant, and he will probably there's a Monday and Thursday. So Monday they play at Minnesota, Thursday they're against Anaheim at home, and Saturday they're against LA at home. So pick your starts, see where you want to start him, but maybe pick him up for Monday against Minnesota. That could be a low scoring game, and then see where you're at for the Thursday matchup against Anaheim. But Grubauer is a decent add this week as well. Up next, a guy that I picked up myself, Joonas Korpisalo. As I mentioned before, LA has 4 games. He will probably get 2 starts. Copley is 57% owned, and he will probably get the other 2. They've been splitting every other game. If you have both of them available on your wire, pick up both of them. LA is on fire, and I believe combined, both of them have lost 1 game each over their past 12 or something to that effect. I think one of them had 5 wins and 6 starts, which is Korpisalo. And I think Copley, if I'm remembering correctly, was something similar, like 6 wins and 7 starts. So they're chipping away at a ton of wins. The goals against is low, 2.31, 920 save percentage. Korpisalo is more ownable than Copley. So if you can't get Copley, get Korpisalo. He'll probably get you 2 starts this week, and they will be quality starts because LA is a quality team with a really good defense as well. But if you have the ability to get Copley as well, that tandem could potentially save your fantasy goaltending season if you have the access to get them. If not, just get Korpisalo and be happy with the team exposure there. Now, one team you don't want exposure to is Montreal, but Sam Montembeault is essentially the starter for Montreal. I can't remember what the overall stats were for Jake Allen because he got pulled 3 goals on 7 shots the other night. His goals against was like 16, and his save percentage was like a .54 or something in that game. Montembeault has been much better. 3 wins in his last 6 starts, 3.25 goals against, 906 save percentage, which is league average, but his goals saved above expected is much better. He's in the top 20 in goals saved above expected. He's only 13% owned, and Montreal. They do have a 4-game week. They have a back-to-back Monday at Buffalo and Tuesday at Philadelphia. So he will get one of those starts. Maybe if you need one of those spot starts, you start Montembeault against Buffalo or Philly, whichever game he plays, and then you ride it out, see what you need from there. You could drop him after that. But he's been relatively productive on a team that, again, gives up a ton of shots and goals. They're still really porous in their own end, but they have been chipping away. And he's one of the only guys that you could potentially own that is technically a starter at 13% ownership. So he's one of those guys that I've been steering clear of the entire season because of the team exposure. But if you're desperate, these 2 starts against Buffalo and Philly are okay. I don't like the Buffalo offense shooting on him, but if he's going against Philly, that's a little bit more manageable. But either way, those 2 teams can score, so be careful picking up Montembeault. But that will lead us to our spot starts. And up front, we have Kochetkov or Ranta, because Ranta could be coming back this week. Whoever's back in net, they have a back-to-back Saturday at Montreal, Sunday against the Islanders. The Montreal game is the better of the 2 starts for whoever's going to play. I would imagine they would save Anderson for the Islander game, but we'll have to wait and see. And we'll have to wait and see if Ranta's healthy. If he is, then he's obviously a little bit more valuable just because of the fact that he's been counted on as the number 2 guy, and he is not waiver eligible. So Kochetkov is not waiver eligible. They'll have to send Kochetkov down if Ranta comes back, and they don't want to carry 3 goaltenders. So keep that in mind. Kochetkov is 16th on the goalie hub. Great stats the other night against Toronto, a 41 save win with a 932 save percentage. He did have 2 stinkers in there before that, but he found his game against Toronto, so that is promising. Up next, we have Alex Lyon, 1% owned. Terrible numbers last game, which was a must-win. So it is hard to trust him, but Florida has 4 games this week with a back-to-back Wednesday at Toronto, Thursday at Montreal. And then Saturday at Columbus. So the back-to-back, if he gets the Montreal game, that would be the place to start him. If they go Bob for both of those games, I'm imagining they're going to give him the Columbus game just to try to give Bob a rest. But either way, if he's there and you need just a win, because the stats have not been great and Florida is still not a great defensive team, this would be one of those very risky options. But if you look at their schedule, he has to play one of those games, you would have to think. So that's why I'm mentioning him. Deep league option if you need a goaltending start and you're in a 16, 18, 20 team league or whatever. He's a guy that you could go to. But another deep league play is Ivan Prosvetov. So last 3 starts have been excellent. 3 wins, 166 goals against, 950 save percentage. They have a 3-game week this week: Monday versus Edmonton, Friday versus Dallas, Saturday versus San Jose. All of those are at home, which is favorable for the Coyotes. They have been much better at home, as I've been mentioning all year. And Prosvetov will probably split with Vejmelka, but he may get one of those 3 games, so keep an eye on which one he's going to start. He's 4% owned, so he's probably there for you in most leagues, but he's been relatively productive, incredibly productive, in the 3 starts that he's had recently. Up next, whoever's the Devils' backup. They have a back-to-back Saturday at Chicago, Sunday at Winnipeg. Right now it's Akira Schmid, but Blackwood did come back last game. They currently have 3 goaltenders on their roster. I would imagine Schmid gets sent down, but Schmid is 21st on the goalie hub, 2.24 goals against, and a 918 save percentage on the year. However, in his last 3 games, 0 wins. He was pulled against Buffalo, and then 3 goals on 7 shots in that game. A 925 against Florida, but he got the loss, and an 875 against Tampa Bay with a loss. So Schmid has not been as productive lately. So Blackwood could be the guy getting the starts. He's only 8% owned. This would be a really nice buy low option because the Devils are still a top 5 defensive team in the league. And as I mentioned it here at the bottom, they do have that back-to-back against Chicago and then at Winnipeg, both on the road. So I would prefer to start Blackwood against Chicago. That does not guarantee he's going to put up good stats because his save percentage hasn't been great when he's in, but he does chip away at some wins. So that is something to keep an eye on. And in his last start against Ottawa, 3 goals against, 893 save percentage, and the win against Ottawa. So that's exactly what I'm talking about in terms of his production. The best spot start of the week will probably be Jaro Halak, 12% owned. The Rangers have a back-to-back Thursday at Jersey, Friday at Buffalo. I don't like the fact that he's playing Buffalo, who does have a high-powered offense, but in his last 3 starts, 2 wins, 199 goals against, 934 save percentage. And if you look at Shesterkin, over his last 5 starts, 4 wins, 181 goals against, 945 save percentage. The Rangers are 8-1-1 in their last 10, and they're averaging 1.9 goals against per game in that span. So they're very tight defensively. A lot of people in the media don't seem to understand that they are a very good defensive team, and they seem to think that Shesterkin floats them, but it's not just Shesterkin, it's Halak as well, and it's because of the team defense exposure. So getting an opportunity to spot start Jaro Halak could help you win your week and could get you your fantasy championship if you play it right. Halak screwed me over last week on Sunday with that shutout. So it is worth mentioning that just because of the fact that on any given night, he could put up a really incredible performance and get you a shutout that could come in handy. I don't know if that'll happen against Buffalo, but it will still probably be a quality start, just given the team exposure that he has. And that brings us to fantasy performance for week 23. This was the first week of my playoffs in all of my leagues, except for the THHL, where I did have the bye. This one shouldn't be close. This is the face-off league that I'm in. I should be moving on in that one. I was behind in both of these matchups until yesterday. I clawed back. I had to make some drastic moves in this league, dropping Roman Josi and a number of other players to try to just get some volume. That may pay off today. We don't know yet. And I don't want to jinx it because I screwed myself over last week. So this is the closest matchup by far. Steve in the Data Draft League, he had the lead all week. He still does. It's projecting me to win, but we never know until the games are played. And the last game tonight is at 10:30. So we may not know until late in the wee hours of the morning on Monday morning who won this matchup if I'm going to continue on in the Data Draft League. But let me know how you're doing. Let me know if you made it through this week on Sunday. This is when the video is being recorded. Let me know how your week is going. If you made it to the next round, if you won your championship, I'd like to hear all those stories in the comments below. If you want any of the player hubs or goalie hubs that you saw in the video, this is your last chance probably, because you have one more week after this to potentially get some value out of that. But scan this QR code right here, $3 a month for just the hubs, $5 a month for the hubs and access to our Discord server. And why not? You're probably going to cancel right after this month anyway, so it's $3 one time, $5 one time, and you get the tools that you need to help you put you over the top to win your championship this week or next week. So just something to think about, but I wish you all the best of luck. Don't forget to set your lineups, and as always, I will see you in the next video tomorrow morning.